Good morning, dear students. Yesterday, we were learning about what is nuclear inheritance and how actually this process of nuclear inheritance takes place. And we also learned that there will be some exception to this nuclear inheritance pattern. And we said some cell organelles like cytoplasm or the mitochondria will play an important role in transfer of characters from parents to their offsprings, and such kind of inheritance we said we call it as cytoplasmic inheritance. Now in this lecture we'll discuss how this cytoplasmic inheritance occurs, taking an example of Paramecium aurelea, and also we will understand one more concept wherein how the maternal cytoplasm influences the expression of a character. Right. So let's start, and today we will learn about cytoplasmic inheritance in Paramecium. Now this slide mainly speaks about the introduction that we have already learned. So the inheritance of most of the characters of an individuals are governed by nuclear genes, as we have discussed, but in some cases the inheritance is also governed by cytoplasmic factors or cytoplasmic genes, which are commonly called as plasma genes. When the transmission of characters from parents to offspring is governed by cytoplasmic genes, it is known as cytoplasmic inheritance, or we also call it as extranuclear inheritance or extra chromosomal inheritance or non-Mendelian inheritance, or one more name, organellar inheritance. Now the name itself explains you what kind of inheritance it is. Now for example, why we call it as extranuclear inheritance? This inheritance is controlled by the other cell organelles other than the nucleus, so it is extranuclear. Extra chromosomal because it is other than chromosomal inheritance. Here no chromosomes are involved, no DNA is involved, and no nuclear genes are involved, so it is called as extra chromosomal inheritance. Then why we call it as non-Mendelian inheritance is because it does not segregate according to the Mendelian inheritance. Or organellar inheritance because the inheritance is controlled by cell organelles like cytoplasm, like the mitochondria or the genes that are present in the cytoplasm. That's why this pattern of inheritance has got all these different names. Now the first case of such cytoplasmic inheritance was reported by Conants in 1909 in 4 o'clock plant, that is Mirabilis jalapa, for its leaf color. Later on, this process of cytoplasmic inheritance was reported by various workers in various organisms. Now in our syllabus we need to learn about cytoplasmic inheritance in Paramecium aurelea. This was studied by T.M. Sonborn. There's a typographical error there, it is not T.N., it is T.M. T.M. Sonborn. He conducted experiments on Paramecium aurelea, and he learned that there are two distinct strains of this species. Now before getting here in this slide, you get to know the difference between nuclear inheritance and the cytoplasmic inheritance. So the nuclear inheritance, they follow a Mendelian pattern, they are governed by nuclear genes and they follow a distinct segregation pattern. Reciprocal differences and maternal effects are not observed in case of Mendelian inheritance, and gene mapping and location of gene mapping is easier as they are located on the chromosomes. But whereas in case of cytoplasmic inheritance, they are governed by plasma genes, they do not segregate in a distinct pattern, and whereas reciprocal differences and maternal effects are observed, and gene mapping becomes difficult because you don't know the exact location of the genes, and then the location of genes here is scattered in chloroplast or in mitochondria. So this gives you a difference between cytoplasmic inheritance and Mendelian inheritance. Now coming back to this example of cytoplasmic inheritance in paramecium, we mainly concentrate on how the inheritance of these kappa particles takes place in paramecium. As I was telling, T.M. Sonborn, he discovered 2 strains of paramecium. Now he named these 2 strains as, one as the killer strain, the other one as the sensitive strain. Now what made him name it as a killer strain is because this killer strain paramecium, in their cytoplasm they had some particle like structures. Now these particles were called as kappa particles, and these kappa particles had an ability to secrete antibiotic kind of a material known as paramycin. Now this paramycin has an ability to kill other parameciums or other protozoans in its surrounding. So because of this, he named these strains of paramecium as killer strain. So the killer strains are the ones which possess kappa particles in their cytoplasm. Now when we say this paramycin is secreted by kappa particles, and this paramycin has an ability to kill, when it diffuses to its surrounding, it has an ability to kill all other protozoans in its vicinity. That means, can one kappa particle can do this job, or will one kappa particle be able to kill the other protozoan in its vicinity? No. There needs to be around 400 kappa particles when it is present in a paramecium. Then only it can induce this ability to kill the other protozoans in its vicinity. So that killing ability comes when there are around 400 kappa particles in a paramecium. And when we say this killing ability, so when we say this killing ability, this depends on certain factors like the temperature, availability of food, and repeated division. On the other hand, the strain without kappa particles is what we call it as sensitive strain, because they are sensitive and they don't have an ability to form this kappa particles. Now how these kappa particles are formed in a paramecium, in a killer strain? Actually these kappa particles are nothing but a self-perpetuating bodies that are found in the cytoplasm, and they are governed by these plasma genes. And these plasma genes are responsible for the inheritance of kappa particles, and once they are formed, they keep on dividing repeatedly. Now, so these are the 2 strains of paramecium that he noticed. One is killer strain and the other one is sensitive strain. And then the multiplication of these kappa particles in the cytoplasm takes place by fission. However, the multiplication is governed by a dominant nuclear gene, capital K. Now they can multiply in the homozygous dominant condition, that is when there are 2 capital Ks, or heterozygous condition where there is 1 capital K which is dominant and 1 small k which is recessive. These kappa particles cannot multiply in recessive condition, wherein when an individual inherits both recessive genes small k and small k, then the kappa particles cannot multiply. Thereby such paramecium will become a sensitive strain. Even if kappa particles are introduced into these recessive strains, they will gradually disappear due to their inability to multiply, and the strain will become sensitive. Now, this inheritance of kappa particles can be studied by conjugation between killer strain and sensitive strain. We all know that paramecium undergoes sexual reproduction through the means of conjugation, and here there are two consequences which we need to consider. When the parameciums are allowed to conjugate for a shorter duration, then what happens? What is the result of it? And when the parameciums are allowed to conjugate for longer duration, what are the consequences? Now let's take one by one. During short conjugation, what happens during short conjugation? Here is a pictorial representation wherein one killer strain is mated with the other sensitive strain. If you want, you can zoom in and check. This is a killer strain and here is the sensitive strain. In killer strain, you can observe inside the paramecium it is fully represented with dots, which are nothing but the kappa particles in the cytoplasm. Whereas in the sensitive strain, it is clear, which shows that there is lack of kappa particles. And when they conjugate, what happens? Here they are conjugating for a shorter duration. During this process, there is exchange of nuclear genes. As a result, the X conjugates that are formed here, they receive only the exchange of nuclear material and there is no exchange of cytoplasmic material seen. That means there is no exchange of cytoplasm between these two paramecium, and hence there is no exchange of kappa particles. Now, when this killer strain and the sensitive strain, when they undergoes autogamy, then it forms from the killer strain you get one killer paramecium with kappa particles and the other one you get sensitive strain. Why? Because here you have got one dominant K and one recessive K in heterozygous condition. Here you got nuclear genes in homozygous recessive condition. So they don't have an ability to form kappa particles, hence it becomes a sensitive strain. And from this sensitive X conjugate, when it undergoes autogamy, it gives both sensitive strain. So this is what has been explained here also. During this short duration of conjugation, it leads to exchange of nuclear genes between the killer and sensitive strains. Exchange of cytoplasm does not take place in such conjugation. As a result, the X conjugates will be heterozygous for killer gene. However, the strain with killer cytoplasm produces killer and sensitive strains by further division, whereas the sensitive strain produces only sensitive strains by further division. This clearly indicates that the killer character is not governed by nuclear gene. This is what happens during short conjugation. Now, when you look at the other instance of long conjugation, that means when parameciums were allowed to conjugate for a longer duration, then what happens? Then what happens means, here are the killer and the sensitive strain. This killer strain, here the kappa particles are missing, so just assume that it has got kappa particles inside, and when they conjugate for a longer duration, nuclear exchange also takes place, so also the cytoplasmic exchange. So in these X conjugates, when the cytoplasm exchange takes place, then there is transfer of kappa particles to both the parameciums. As a result, when they undergoes autogamy, each one will form one killer strain and one sensitive strain. This again shows that the cytoplasm plays an important role in the inheritance of kappa particles. So here during long conjugation between killer and the sensitive strains, it leads to exchange of both nuclear and cytoplasm, and here both the ex-conjugates are heterozygous, but in killer strains, autogamy of these ex-conjugates produces killer and sensitive strain in the ratio 1:1. This has demonstrated that kappa particles are cytoplasmic in inheritance. So this topic they will ask you as a 10 marker question, wherein they will ask you to describe cytoplasmic inheritance in paramecium with a neat label diagram. You will draw both these diagrams and explain both the consequences of short conjugation and long conjugation, and you will write all the points that are there in the slides, so which will fetch you 10 marks. Now this is one aspect of it. The other aspect is the maternal effects. Here to study this, like what is this maternal effects is all about. Now so far you learned that in case of cytoplasmic inheritance, it is the cytoplasm that plays a very important role in governing the expression of a character, right? Now here also the maternal cytoplasm, that is the cytoplasm which is contributed by the mother or the egg, plays a distinct role in controlling the expression of a character, and such phenomenon is what we call it as maternal effects. Now this occurs mainly due to more contribution of cytoplasm to the zygote by the female parent than the male parent. Generally, ovum contributes more cytoplasm to the zygote than the sperm. Or in other words, to put it simply, when the expression of a character is influenced by the genotype of a female parent, it is referred to as maternal effect. So such characters exhibit clear-cut differences in F1 for reciprocal crosses, that you will understand when we learn with an example. Now to learn this maternal effects, generally we consider the example of coiling in shells in the species Limnia peregrina. So here we learn about shell coiling pattern in snail Limnia peregrina. So here the effect of maternal genotype on the coiling behavior in water snail was studied by Struvent. There are two types of coiling pattern of shell in snail Limnia peregrina, the right-handed, which you call it as dextral rotation, and left-handed, which is called as sinistral rotation. Now the coiling behavior here is controlled by a single gene. The dextral coiling is governed by a dominant allele D and a sinistral by a recessive allele D, right? Dextral is considered to be dominant and it is denoted by capital letter D, and sinistral by recessive letter small d. When a cross is made between dextral female and a sinistral male, it produces dextral snails in F1 as well as in F2. However, in F3, that is the third filial generation, a segregation ratio of 3 dextral and 1 sinistral is observed. Similarly, when a reciprocal cross is made, that is a sinistral female with a dextral male, all the snails are found to be sinistral in F1 and dextral in F2. Why they become sinistral in F1? Because we said that the phenotype here is influenced by the maternal genotype. So what is the genotype of the female here? It is sinistral. So they all will become sinistral in F1 and dextral in F2. Again in F3, a ratio of 3 dextral and 1 sinistral is observed. This indicates that the inheritance of coiling direction or the coiling pattern in water snail depends on the genotype of the female parent and not on its own genotype. Now here it is represented simply like whatever we discussed so far. When a dextral female, so here the dextral female with capital D and capital D, when it is mated with a sinistral male, you have all dextral in F1, and when this dextrally rotated snail, when it is inbred, then you have in F2 you get all dextrals. Here, in spite of having recessive D and two small d's, it becomes dextral in nature because the mother will show a dextral rotation. Yeah, sorry, there was some skipping of the screen. Yeah, so in F2 you get all dextral, and in F3 it gets segregated according to the Mendelian ratio of 3:1. Whereas on the other side, if you take a sinistral female and a dextral male, the F1 you get sinistral coiling because its phenotype is determined by the maternal genotype. Since your female is sinistral, in F1 you get all sinistral. That when it is inbred, you get all sinistral in the F2 generation, and then in F3 there is a sorting out of phenotype in 3:1 ratio. So here the maternal genotype affects the organization of the egg cytoplasm. In other words, it affects what? The maternal cytoplasm, the cytoplasm which is contributed by the egg. It affects the orientation of the first cleavage plane in the zygote. If it is tilted to the left, the successive cleavages will produce a spiral to the left. If it is tilted to the right, then the dextral pattern will follow. So these are the works, this is the reason or the research done by Suzuki and Griffiths in 1976, and they explained like why this kind of maternal effect takes place, and this is the reason that they have suggested, wherein the cleavage pattern, the pulling of the spindle fibers, all what do you call the so in other words, they said that like during this process of cleavage, the spindle fibers get tilted either to the right or to the left. When they are tilted towards the right, the shell will result in right-handed coiling, that is they give rise to the dextral pattern. If the spindle fibers are tilted towards the left, then that results in sinistral coiling of the shell patterns. That's how the maternal cytoplasm plays a role in expression of a character, and hence the shell coiling in snail Limnaea peregrina is an example of maternal effect. Now this question will also come for as a 10 marker question. You have to represent this. If possible, if you have time, you can represent it diagrammatically like this, or even the schematic representation would do, and you have to explain all the points that are there in the slide. So thank you for listening to me.